You are anti-DEI because you think race doesn't matter. But you also think that when black people become a majority, innovation will reduce in the US, which means that you think race matters. You understand? Do you think race matters or you think race doesn't matter? Elon Musk's father, Errol Musk, have granted an interview to CNN that has revealed to the world why US President Donald Trump is so obsessed with South Africa and seems to have issues with the government of South Africa. It has to do with a concept known as white replacement theory. And we get into all of that in a bit. Before we do, my name is Nenebi Tony. I'm a Ghanaian writer who lives in the US. On this channel, I talk about geopolitics from the perspective of an African. Subscribe to my channel if that's something you are into. Let me start with some history and build up from there. Let's start with the history of Trump and South Africa. So in 2018, while he was in office, South Africa was debating passing a land law known as the Land Expropriation Act. And that negotiation was going on for the entirety of the 2010s. And so when Trump came to office in 2018, he said he was monitoring the situation in South Africa to ensure that the South African government is doing the right thing. This was after some white South Africans had complained that the South African government is trying to take over their lands. You understand? So we started in 2018. And then in 2025, when President Trump was elected, the white South Africans went to the US Embassy in South Africa to protest in support of Trump, that they are happy that Trump is back in office. And they also raised the issue of the land situation. Now, what is the land situation in South Africa? I'll explain. So in 1913, South Africa passed a law called the Native Land Act that designated 7% of the land in South Africa as native reserves. And that extended to about 13% later. But what it means is that 13% of land in South Africa is owned by the native South Africans. The word native is very important. The native South Africans who were the black South Africans, right? And so, according to the law, the 13% of land is the only land that can be owned by black South Africans. Outside of that, the remaining over 80%, almost 90% of land in South Africa cannot be owned or leased by black South Africans. It was in the law that white South Africans cannot sell land to black South Africans, right? So even if a black South African had money to buy land, they could not buy land in South Africa from 1913. And then in 1975, South Africa passed a new law which gave the government of South Africa the chance the power to take over control of land for public interest and purposes, right? It didn't say anything about whether you are black or white. The government of South Africa can take over your land and use it for public good. And, you know, evidence showed that majority of the land that were taken from for public good in South Africa were black only. But that's a whole different conversation. My point is this. Basically, black South Africans were disadvantaged in owning land. And the issue came all the way to 1993 when South Africa was moving from apartheid to democracy, and they were building or drafting their constitution. They put it in their constitution that the government will take steps, including the expropriation or seizure of land, to ensure the public good of South Africans, including for equity and justice purposes, right? And so it was enshrined in the Constitution of South Africa from the 90s that at some point, the South African government is going to take steps to ensure that land ownership in South Africa is fair. And if you're coming from a history where black people cannot own land in South Africa, fair means that steps must be taken to ensure that black people can own land in South Africa. Because, you know, you get what I'm trying to say. That is the points we got to in the 2010s when South Africa started debating passing a new land law. And the word expropriation is a legal word that means seizure or takings. And now, I'll say this. Almost every constitution in the world, worth its salt, have a takings clause or national interest clause. In Ghana, I think it's called public acquisition or national acquisition. It has different names. But what it simply means is that the government doesn't own land, private citizens own land. And so sometimes the government needs land for some purposes. Schools are public good that the government needs land to build. Roads are public goods that the government needs land to build. Parks. There are so many things that the government needs land to build for the good of the community. And so in order for the government to get land to build these things, they have to take the land from the people. That is why in the US it's called the takings clause. But in every constitution in the world that has a takings clause, there is a provision on what you are supposed to do to take the land. So in most countries in the world, what that means is that the government will pay market value for the land to take over, right? So if the land is in a neighborhood where it will cost $10,000 to buy it, the government will pay you $10,000 to take it. A lot of time, government will be generous and maybe give you 12 to 15,000. I know this because I know people who in Ghana, government had to take their land for some reasons. The government usually will pay above market value for you, right? But that's beside the point. So when the government of South Africa passed the new law for the takings purposes, it's based on 1, the Constitution of South Africa, 2, the 1975 laws in South Africa, and 3, national best practice. The US government has a takings clause that it is respected as law. So when President Trump and the people who support him are saying that the government of South Africa is taking land from white farmers, someone will say the government of the US is taking land from white farmers in the US, because every military base in the South which is owned by the US government, they have to take the land from white farmers, because remember, black people didn't own land in the US, from white farmers to build those public sites. Anything you can think about that the US government built in the US, they had to take the property they built it from white farmers. Again, the black people didn't own land in the US. So most of the takings that happened in the US had happened to white people. So if President Trump has an issue with the government of South Africa taking land from white farmers in South Africa, President Trump, if he believes what he's saying, should have an issue with the US government taking land from white people in the US. You get my logic? Good. And so this is the foundation on which President Trump built his argument that South Africa is oppressing and persecuting white people, and there is a genocide of white farmers in South Africa. And it was so crazy that in January of this year, I believe maybe January, February, President Trump, in the middle of his crackdown on immigration, offered asylum for white people to come from South Africa to the US to seek asylum. Yeah. So in the middle of an immigration crisis in the US that President Trump is hard knock on trying to solve, he made reservation for white farmers in South Africa. And how did he come to this conclusion? Elon Musk's father says something on CNN, which I'm about to tell you, which makes me realize how President Trump came to care about South Africa. Elon Musk donated so much money to President Trump. And if I gave money to somebody to make them president of a country, I want something in return. Everybody think about the fact that Elon Musk wanted the US government to support what SpaceX is doing, what Tesla is doing, all those stuff. But I'll tell you something. It doesn't matter who the president of the US is. NASA is not developing space technology at the rate SpaceX is doing. There's no electric car company that is working at the rate Tesla is working. And so when it comes to his businesses, Elon Musk is good in terms of government, right? Government of the US is not going to wake up tomorrow and stop doing business with Elon Musk unless Jeff Bezos is able to develop his technology to the point where he can compete with SpaceX, and he's not at that point yet. You understand? So what Elon Musk will get from Donald Trump is the pet issues Elon Musk cares about. And now Elon Musk's father made us understand that Elon Musk cares about white replacement theory. So white replacement theory is this theory that white people are replacing black people around the world. In South Africa, I'll give you a funny statistics. It's not funny, ha ha ha, but it's a funny statistics because it makes my point. So in 1948, when apartheid government came to office in South Africa, the black population was 7.8 million, which is about 70% of the population. Today in 2025, the black population in South Africa is 50 million, which is about 80%. The point is, at the time of the apartheid regime started in South Africa, the black population was about 70%. Today, the black population is about 80%. 10% increase in population growth, not that huge. But I'm bringing this up to say this. Elon Musk's father said the apartheid government fed the black people. That's why they keep growing. And then they kept growing in number. And they grew from a small number to a huge number. Bro, black people were the majority in South Africa in 1948. They were 70% of the population. Black people are still the majority in South Africa. They are 80%. So, whether they were fed or not, it doesn't matter what happened in South Africa. It is not the reason the black population grew. The government of South Africa should be commending black people in South Africa for growing in spite, not because, in spite of the government. But that's beside the point. Now, this white replacement theory is also crazy to the extent that Elon Musk's father also made some comments that it was going to be crazy for the US if black people became a majority. And then he went on to say, you don't like technology, you don't like science, and you want black people to become a majority. So basically what he's saying is that white people are the people driving innovation in the US. And so if black people become a majority in the US, the driving of innovation will reduce. He's free to think what he thinks. Here's my problem. Errol Musk and his son Elon Musk are anti-DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And their reason for being anti-DEI is this, that DEI make it that the government or the employers or businesses have to consider race or in their hiring preferences. And race should not be part of your consideration in your hiring. It has to be race blind. It doesn't matter whether a person is black or white. If they are good and qualified for the job, you hire them. That is the reason why they are anti-DEI. Here's my issue with that. You are anti-DEI because you think race doesn't matter. But you also think that when black people become a majority, innovation will reduce in the US, which means that you think race matters. You understand? So you have to die on one hill. Do you think race matters or you think race doesn't matter? If you are anti-DEI because you think race doesn't matter, I'm okay with that. If you are pro-white replacement because you think white people are smarter than black people, I'm also okay with that. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying I'm okay with that. You have the right to be wrong. As a human being, I'm a 100% free speech advocate. You have the right to be wrong. What you can't do is use one argument to support a point and use the opposite argument to support a different point at the same time. You have to have a consistent way of thinking. If you believe that black people are not smart and so you don't want to hire black people, come out and say it. I'm racist. I hate black people. I don't want black people to work for me. I'm okay with that. If you are anti-DEI because you think race doesn't matter, the best person should get a job, say it. And so if you are anti-DEI, then white replacement theory should not be something you are worried about because it wouldn't matter. You understand? I can make so many arguments that, mention the list of, what's the name? black people who have increased or led to scientific advancement in the world, all the black people in the world who have directly led Elon Musk to where he is. I don't want to go into all of that. That is trivial. The most important point is you can't make an argument and make the opposite argument in the same breath. If you do that, you're not a wise person. And I want to believe that Errol Musk, because he was a huge political figure in South Africa, is a wise person. So it's two things. It's either he's a dummy or he's a hypocritical dummy. Those are the two options. He has to pick one. Anyway, I said that he was a politician. I didn't say that earlier. But you know what? I'll make another video. And in my second video, I'll address another thing that he said in that CNN interview. He said that South Africa did not oppress black people during apartheid. I'll present you with some facts. That's what I like to do on this channel. I just present you with some facts. I don't like drawing conclusions for people because I don't like it when people try to draw conclusions for me. And so I'll present you with some facts and then you tell me what you think it is. So based on this, my whole point is the reason why Trump hates South Africa is because Trump believes in this idea of white replacement theory. He really believes that black people took over South Africa. Black people were the minority in South Africa and somehow grew to become the majority. And that is what is happening in the US. That was not the case in South Africa. Black people were the majority in South Africa and are still the majority in South Africa. Nothing changed. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to this channel if you are into my way of thinking. And tell me in the comments what you think about my thoughts. Thank you for watching.